introduce Dr. Ashok Kapoor, who is in business and MIS, and he will relate with the Hindu faith perspective. And then to his left, Abdul Rashid Salat, and he is a senior, a computer science major with a mathematics minor, and he will be relating his Muslim faith perspective. Dr. Barbara Lehmann, who is in social work, and she will come at this with her Jewish faith perspective, and Thao, who is the director of Pan-Asian Student Services, and she is a Buddhist. And welcome, and thank you to all of you. Several of us on the panel got to sit together about a week or two ago for an hour, hour and a half, and I learned so much from my colleagues here, and I know that we all will again during this hour. And the question to begin with is, what does peace mean to you, and how has that been informed by your religious or faith experience? Thao, would you like to start?
So I get to go first. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you very much for coming, and again, as Sonja has said, I actually wanted to say I'm just starting to learn about Buddhism, and I've been studying Buddhism for about maybe a year and a half, and it has really grounded me in terms of my spiritual, just pretty much everything. The way I see things is in a different light, and I grew up very conservative Christian, and if my mom ever found out that I'm a Buddhist, she'd probably freak out, so she doesn't know that yet. But what peace means to me, and in terms of the Buddhist perspective, and what I see is Buddhism really talks about looking yourself and really looking inside yourself instead of projecting it. It's your fault, or whatever happened that's bad, it's someone else's fault, or someone else has to blame. But what it does is it actually takes a look at yourself, and takes a look at, when you do things, an perspective is what, and it also, what peace also means to me is forgiveness and patience, which is also one of the underlying messages of Buddhism, and probably all the other religions as well. With also that, I think what was happening during September 11th, I think I really had to take a step back and look at how I would have reacted if I wasn't studying the Buddhism, and how I would have reacted when I did. Because I think what I ended up doing was to take a step back and said, nobody's right or wrong. There's got to be a deeper issue to this, and a lot of people were angry. A lot of people were. Just at the fact, and I think having forgiveness, patience, and learning how to deal with anger was also a big thing that also Buddhism also talks about. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let everybody talk, and we can have a discussion.
Good evening. I was part of this discussion earlier last week, and it was really quite remarkable. And I've been sitting here, I've done my research, I've looked at, the historical meaning of peace within Judaism, and as with other religions, we reconstruct ourselves over time in terms of what peace means. But I think we'll get into some of that later. What I want to talk about is my own story and how this began. I am a child of I'm a very fortunate person. My parents were very, very focused on civil rights. My father was born in Germany in the 1920s, 1925 to be exact. And if people think of their history, this was not a really good time for the Jewish people in Europe. And so he was able, luckily, because the German government had the wisdom, or I say that with a bit of skepticism, to take my grandfather's business away. My grandfather was an egg merchant. He had an egg distributorship, and Jews, because of purity laws, in 1931 were not allowed to deal in food items. So his business was taken away. And very luckily, really, was able to recognize that this Nazi threat isn't something that's not going to happen. He was one of the people who was early affected by the racism and the genocide that was going to begin. So he was able to take his family out of Europe, were able to get visas to come to the United States. So I was born into a family that had had a lot of trauma. My father got out with his brother, his mother, and his father, which was wonderful considering so many people who had lost their lives or lost families. But all of his aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents perished. So into that life, I came and we learned about what hatred does and how far hatred and racism can take you. And I think it really, for me, informed my vision that everybody is equal. America was a great country, and that it was our obligation to make the world a better place, which was a very important Jewish concept, is that we are to heal the world. And part of healing the world means working toward peace. So I think my own personal life has been informed by, if one person is suffering, then it's my job to make certain that that there is no suffering, and that if I can help one person, it was something that was spoken about earlier, to heal one person is as if you can heal the world. And to hurt some person is also as if you've murdered or hurt the entire world. And so that larger framework was always very important to me in terms of my Jewish tradition. I have to say, this is a really tough time to be talking about peace in Judaism. Because of what's happening in the Middle East right now. It's an extremely painful time for Jews and Muslims who really are children of Abraham to have to confront the sibling rivalry that goes on in this awful battle for real estate and this non-understanding of traditions, where our tradition is, for all of us, comes from a tradition of justice, being peaceful, and working toward seeing the world as a peaceful place. Thank you.
My name is Abdul Rashid. Islam is the religion I believe, and people who believe Islam as a religion are called Muslims. And Islam itself is synonymous with peace, which in reality is derived form of peace and become Islam. And to define peace in the Islamic way, it's giving everybody what he deserves without regard of race, color, or creed. And we have been informed through that way. And it's in the scripture, it's written that way. And in my whole culture, I've been seeing that way. But things have changed past few months, where after September 11th, things have been reinvented. And if you say Islam and peace, they may not seem synonymous, but until things that go either way. But things are in that true way. To me, in my life and the life I had back home in Somalia where I was born, we never had justice, and that is part of the peace we're looking for. And as the discussion goes on, I'll allow to elaborate things that you may ask me and others may have for the rest of you.
I'm Dr. Kapoor, and I practice Hinduism. I was born a Hindu, as most of us follow the religion we are born into. And I don't see any reason to change. Because one of the things that I accept is that God is God, and it doesn't matter which path you take to achieve God in your life. Ultimately, all roads lead you to the same point. With regard to peace and religion, I'm an economist by training, and I think in terms of macro and micro. And so the macro aspect of peace, in some sense, is absence of war. Although I also believe that sometimes to achieve that peace, you have to fight a war. And it seems to me that the United States is just doing that right now. So according to Hinduism, that war we are fighting in Afghanistan is a just war to accomplish long-term peace. Without that war, it'll be, if not impossible, difficult to achieve peace. But on a micro level, peace is individual. Peace is in your mind, in your heart. In our daily struggles to earn a livelihood, to take care of our families and ourselves, we are always struggling and we are not at peace. And that is the more important piece. However, that peace cannot be achieved if the first macro piece is not there. If your country is at war and you're afraid for your survival, obviously you cannot achieve mental peace or peace at your heart. I'll stop with that and come back with questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Aaron Kolb, and I am a junior here at Augsburg College. Like Sonja said, I'm a religion major. I wasn't obviously always at the point where I am now. 2.5 years ago, I was looking for schools, and I came from a small town in southeastern Minnesota. In a small community, I wasn't aware of the issues and concerns that we deal with today. A lot of the issues that have been shared today on homosexuality, LGBT issue, racism issues, and that sort of thing. I have really learned a lot about just what our world actually has in it. At the same time, in growing in the past 2.5 years, I've also learned a lot about Christianity. And in Christianity, I have learned that we really center our beliefs on the person of Jesus Christ, the God-man who came to earth. When we talk about peace, I really believe that we look at the person of Jesus Christ. To be Christian means to be Christ-like. And we take a look at, in the Bible, the Christian book, the life of Jesus and what he preached and what he taught and what he lived out. To love one another, to forgive, and not to fight back, to turn the other cheek in a way. I guess the question we have to ask ourselves is, does two wrongs make a right? Or do we rather forgive and find ways to talk about the issues instead of pick up a gun? I'm learning a lot in an ethics class that I'm taking right now. And a guy by the name of Dr. Enright, I believe, who's actually doing sociological studies on the power of forgiveness and how it can be very life-giving for the person who forgives and the person who is being forgiven. And just the power of forgiveness and love and acceptance, which we all want. And I really believe that Christianity teaches this lesson through the life of Jesus Christ. I'll stop there and we can have a discussion.
When we talked last week, we imagined about a 20-foot in diameter table where all of us, including all of you, would be part of a dialogue. And so if you just can imagine that in your mind for a moment, that together this whole group sits around a huge round table. And does anybody have any questions or comments on peace and faith?
I guess I'm very talkative, huh? I wanted to ask, the only two religions that I actually really know about is the Islam religion, and I've been learning a lot about Christianity. So I'm new to the Judaism and the Buddhism and the Hinduism, or is that how you say it? Hinduism. And I was wondering, in your perspective, where do you think, because I know in every religion, you know, a peace is promised. If you do this, if you follow God, if you're good, God would grant you that, and that God would save us from certain things. And I am I guess my question is I consider myself a good person, but the world I live in is not good. So I was wondering where God is, like in this situation, and I was hoping maybe if this is not too much, or if you guys can say a little bit about if you actually blame what happened September 11, or if you think it reflected Islam, or what was your first reaction? Was that more like, oh, there's a war between Christians and Islam, or more like there's something has to be behind it, there's political reasons, and those people are hiding behind a religion?
I'm certainly ready to address that. You asked several different questions, and that's fine because that gives me room to kind of flow where my mind goes with it. But the first thing that runs to my mind is your question of September 11th, because I think we all have been profoundly affected by that and have strong feelings. When I first heard about it, like everyone else, I was in shock. I was hurt, frightened. And my first I can't even remember my first response anymore, except that it was denial, which is, this really can't be happening, or, oh my God, what is this about? And just as the day continued on and more problems. It's an interesting piece in terms of, did I hold Islamic culture responsible for it, or the Islamic religion responsible? No. I think everyone can pervert religion with fundamentalism. And I think it's a political issue. I think there are people who are particularly angry at the United States. And we haven't been, we have pushed our might around quite a bit. I think I can't say that I can excuse what happened because it was a horrible waste of life. But certainly, and I guess I'm not talking in Jewish terms right now, but this is my own heart speaking, but certainly we have annihilated many other people, as this country has done too. And, sometimes what goes around comes around, and I think we have to be aware of how we push our might around. In terms of Judaism, it's interesting as you talk about God, because I think the Jewish concept of God, at least as how I understand it, is not particularly an active God that kind of decides what's going to happen or makes plans of how it's going to happen. And I think you have to recognize that Judaism is a very, very old religion. Not as old, we're youngsters compared to the Hindus and possibly even the Buddhists, but I'm not even sure about that. But I'm sure as I say, we are a very, very old religion, and our concepts of God have changed over time too, because part of growing is a growth of concepts. And I think at first point, 3,500 years ago, the concept of God, because we understood so little, was this very, very active God who, when something bad happened, it was like, oh my God, we're in trouble with God right now. And forces of nature were seen as God-willed forces. But over time, that's really changed. And I think the understanding is of a God who is much more there as a source of strength and peace and hope, and that to be godlike, to create peace makes you nearer to God, and that essence of oneness that we, in Judaism, every day, 3 times a day, we say a prayer that says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." And that's a sense that we are all one as people, not even just the Jewish people, but we're all images and part of God. So peace and that oneness, when we recognize that we're all part of this one powerful source, the Spirit, war is anathema to that.
I guess I'd just like to add to that in the whole idea of peace and what it means to be a peaceful person, starting with the individual. In the Bible, a lot like Jim said this morning in the convocation. He used the Bible verse Micah 6:8, which says, "To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with God is the way that God calls us to live." To be humble, to not get caught up in our greed, in our personal agenda, what we want, but rather to humble ourselves, is really, I think, the key to peace and what God invites us to. And I guess that's really where it needs to start. And with the whole thing of 9/11, I would say that it was a personal choice. I would say that the greed and the individual decision was not an act of God, but rather of a person making a choice to do what was on their personal agenda.
Just one comment I would like to make on the September 11th, and that is the Muslim friends I have, and Amin Kader, his office is next door to mine, and I've heard him and talked to him a lot about this. And interestingly, he made a comment that it was not just the planes that were hijacked on September 11, but a whole religion was hijacked. It just happens that those people were Muslim, but I don't know of anything in Muslim religion which causes or tells people to do something like this. So I think it was more a decision of the leadership of those people and less of the religion thrust, even though that's what they have tried to convince the world about, that that's what their religion dictated to them to do. But I think they're misinterpreting the religion if they're using that, for the little bit that I know about the Muslim religion. Thank you.
In terms of what I believe, and actually the first reaction I thought, and I actually didn't, I was driving my way to work, and there's, on the news, and it felt like watching TV, you're watching a movie. So I was a little dazed, and then also, to me, I also don't think it was, say, the people of Islam or, Muslim. I think it was like what everybody else is saying, is that it's an individual who, in their belief, sought it so blindly that they thought it was truth. And I can see that in every religion, where you can take something and take it so literally and believe it in so much that it blinds you to the point where you see that as truth. And I don't necessarily blame, the people of Islam, or blame any individual. I think what we need to look at, or what I think the outcome of what I've seen, is to really take a look at that and say, obviously somebody was angry, or hatred to the point where they had to destroy lives. And I think to look at that and then take a look at yourself and say, why am I angry at this? Am I angry at this person? How is it that I can look, or I can take a step back and rationally think this through and not hold that anger towards anybody? Because the whole time I was thinking about how it affected the United States, and I was thinking, all the other countries face this every day. And I wasn't even shocked when I heard this. And I mean, it was kind of sad, and I'm a little surprised to have said that, but I think a lot of immigrants come here and they see that every day. They experience that firsthand. And so when this happens and I see the flags, and I felt a little bit, I don't even know how to say it, I felt a little bit like, not defensive, but yet, at the same time I was thinking, why is it affecting you so much? This is how other people feel. And I think that instead of taking that and saying, and it's kind of opening everybody else's eyes to say, some of these people face this every day, and from there, take a look at how is it that I can do in order to make that, more of a better world, or where in the environment that I'm in, not to say, well, I'm hurt, help me or whatever. It's more of like saying, okay, I see where you come from, and you know, now that I see that, you know, what is it that we can do in order to maybe bridge this gap of hatred among us? So.
Just to elaborate what everybody was saying, in order to see the clear picture of the link between the terrorist attacks on September 11th and the Islamic teaching, you will understand those guys do not represent Islam. In the Islamic teaching, one of the hijackers, I think his name was Muhammad Atta, was in a bar that night, the night before maybe, drank, someone saw it. And in the Islamic teaching, drinking itself is one of the things that Islam prohibits. And if someone who is unlawfully just doing what Islam prohibits, wouldn't it be easy for him also to do other things that Islam prohibits? Yes, that's the case. And the only thing we hear about is that guy only. The others may have been doing something similar to that. And if you look at it, okay, the acts they had is not Islamic act, but what they did over there also is not an Islamic act, and no Muslim in the world supports. And it's the Islamic core that killing one individual, one innocent individual, it just killing the whole humanity. And those guys had their own choice, and they did it. And the only unfortunate thing we have is that even prior to September 11th, the Muslim fundamentalists and people who do things in their own hands get disproportionate media cover as other religions get. Imagine if you go back a little bit about the Balkan War, many Orthodox Christians killed a lot of Muslims. No one ever just attributed those acts to Christian faith. Killing these Christians kill Muslims. But what we have been hearing is that, Serb militiamen killed innocent women, rape. Similar in here, when way back 92 maybe, Waco attacks when the guy just, dissociated people killed, nobody ever just said it's Christian. And that's the unfortunate thing that Islamic faith has. We get, disproportionate media cover that at least affects innocent people who do not have anything to do with it. And it's been really apparent in the Islamic world as well, because possibly if you have been known a journal called Al Jazeera, which airs in the Arab world, many Muslims, get their main source. It does the opposite over there. And it just creates the two different environments. Over there you hear only the other side. You don't hear every claim that's being said here, but you hear what is wrong with they saying, and then that creates a hatred between the two sides. And that's really unfortunate, and it's little that we can do right now about it.
No, I appreciate you stating that. I want to respond to something that you had said, Bao, and that was talking about, I have had an incredibly strong reaction to the United States, the people's reaction of incredible patriotism. Patriotism sometimes can get out of hand, and it really scares me. One of the things, I was talking with my dad a few months ago, and he was saying, we were talking about everybody and his uncle has a flag pasted someplace or hanging up, and he said he hadn't seen so much flag waving since he left Germany, when he was seeing the Nazi flags flying. And I think we need to listen to that. It's very easy to with a reaction saying, well, they've heard us, let's play Rambo, and put up our flags and load our shotgun, or M16 or whatever we choose to load. And I think we have to be very careful of knee-jerk reactions with that. We're hurt, and it's important to recognize that what happened was painful. It should also, as you had said, Bill, open our hearts to recognize that people are being hurt like this all over the world, and hopefully we can take from this a way to look at our own actions and a way to hold our own government accountable. We have certainly in the government, we're talking about rights today, have lost incredible rights to free speech, for protection of speech. People's Phone calls can be monitored if you're even associated and a member of a group. And I guess I'm soapboxing, huh? But even if you become a member of a group right now where the group is considered terrorist or as links with terrorism, you have no rights to have telephone calls that can't, there doesn't have to be a judge search warrant to tape you and to listen to what you're saying. That's not America in my view.
About the flag waving, I just want to make one quick comment. I hope I'm right on this. I don't mind the flag waving as much, but I think those who put the flags up don't know the rules about the flags. For example, I have a neighbor who has a flag on a pole 24 hours a day, wind, storm, and everything. You're supposed to raise the flag at sunrise and lower it at sunset. And if you want to do this, you should know those rules.
Thanks. Other questions? Andy.
I'm interested in maybe a little discussion about the micro aspects of peace, and perhaps a look at each religion and either views, either personal views or views from the religion itself that help guide persons towards individual peace that can then stretch out to the community in which they live.
Very good question. Okay. With peace and war, I mean, with Buddhism, what I see is forgiveness was the thing. Is I deal with it every day. Anger, you wake up and if you're not thinking, something happens, you get angry, you're yelling, and then you do something that you're going to regret. You're going to hurt the other person's probably going to be like, why is she mad at me? And then they're going to go get angry and they're going to take it to somebody else. And then it starts from that moment. And what I've realized when I started to look at Buddhism is that I take a step back and take a deep breath and just, and then I come back and I say, well, that was really stupid. I could have done this, this, this. And it also, what I've also known, what I see is that people have here in America they live stressful lives. I mean, having 2 jobs, you're working multitask, and sometimes you don't think, you don't take a step back, and that's what's happened to me. And I think when I do that, I think it shows other people to kind of take a step back as well. When you're the first person to say, not to yell back at them when they yell, and just kind of let them talk about it, they'll realize that too as well. So, and I think it starts at the individual level, because when you pass that anger to somebody, it gets passed to somebody else, and it just goes around. So.
Okay. It's very odd for me to be talking about Judaism, because one of the jokes in Judaism, if you get 2 Jews together, you're going to have 3 opinions, because part of our culture is to argue issues of religion. And so trying to speak as one voice is really an impossible task. So I've got to give you a layman version, play on words, of how I see it. There are certain things inculcated into Judaism and certain concepts that I think are really important. One concept, you guys have all heard the word shalom, right? Shalom means what? Peace, right? One of the concepts that we grew up with is something called shalom bayit. Bayit means house, which means one of your roles is to keep a peaceful home. And home becomes a refuge where you can have that peace. Another thing that Judaism does for folks who are more observant than I am, but I think is a beautiful piece of the religion, is that on our Sabbath, from Friday night at sundown until Saturday night at sundown, we do not work, we don't ride in cars, we don't create fires, can't turn on your lights. We're not allowed to create or destroy. It's a time of taking time to be with family, to not be distracted. You can't balance your checkbook. You can't touch money, and you can't write. Okay? So it's a time to really focus back on being a human being and on being connected with the Spirit, where you really remove the distractions. And I think if we, in that way, I think we develop a sense of what it is to be human and peaceful. And my goal is anything that you can create micro in yourself, you're going to give to others with an expansion of it. Thank you.
The inner peace in Islam is the main concept of why we pray 5 times a day. And that's a reminder for you, say in the morning, early in the morning, you wake up and you remember God. And in Islam, if you remember God, you'll be peaceful. And believe me, those who you see all around the world who just commit these crimes that we call terrorist acts, they're not true Islam if you look back the real source of Islam. And by praying 5 times a day, you'll go down and get the concept of Islam. Forgive, take it easy. Life is always too much. You'll get it over. And that leads us toward having a stable life and enforces families to be together most of the time.
In Hinduism, they actually talk about several paths to achieving peace and godhood. And we talk about meditation and yoga, for example. And one of the things they teach is that keeping up with the Jonases is the worst way to achieve peace. Keeping up with the Jonases is the worst way to achieve peace. You have to be satisfied with what God has provided you. And it's our senses, the 5 senses, and we become slaves to them. And therefore we are always trying to accumulate more and more and more. And you cannot achieve peace in that way. And especially when people like us, immigrants, come to America, in America it is even harder because the culture is to accumulate more and more and more. And so at this point, I would stop here.
I guess I'd just like to reiterate a little bit about what I said at the beginning and then move a little further maybe. In Christianity, like I said before, to be Christian means to be Christ-like. The example of Jesus, to some he's believed to be a prophet. To the Christians he's believed to be God in the flesh. In his ministry, when he would go out and heal people and show love and acceptance and treat people as equals, is the example, I believe, in the Christian religion that we are to follow. Maybe people have heard of the gifts of the Spirit: peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control, and there's a few more. But it really starts with, as Bao was saying, the inner person, and also the power of forgiveness, as we see Jesus doing right before he died on the cross. He said, "Father, forgive him, for he not know what he does, hanging me here on the cross." So on the very micro to the root, to the inner being, those are the kinds of things as Christians we try to develop. In interaction with one another, as we've been doing a lot this whole week in the days in May, it's the idea of coming with an open mind and not being afraid to be honest. The man in the last session had talked about political correctness and thought it was, there's no room for it. There is room for it, but it hinders us from being honest with each other and asking the real important questions. And I think when we want to talk about different issues, when we want to talk about differences and try to find peace and compromise to be able to treat each other lovingly and accepting, we need to come with that open mind and a fear of not having a fear of being honest. And most importantly, as one of my friends has told me before, it's important to talk and talk and talk. And if there are still issues, talk some more. continually being in conversation, which we are now, which is just great, to begin to address these issues and our differences is something that, as a Christian, is the way to peace, through love and acceptance of people, of ideas, and ways of life.
Thank you. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Louis Alamayu. I was wondering, I've been trying to figure out a question to ask, and I'm not sure which question to ask. So I'll just run maybe two by you, and you can respond to any of them. According to your respective traditions, do you believe that the creation is sacred? Another question that came to mind is there anything that you believe deeply that you're reluctant to say or afraid to say in this environment? And this is the last one. How much do you believe that the current world crisis is about greed around resources?
Thank you. Can we start with Aaron and go down the other way? Thank you.
I guess we could start with the first one, greed of resources. I would agree, yes. Let me explain the other two, kind of combining all of them together. The first question, is life sacred? Is the creation from God to life sacred? I would say yes, it is. God, the supreme being who creates life, has a plan. And to create life and to give us freedom. But noticing through all the religions, he doesn't leave us. He gives us a plan to follow, to live peacefully. And I think it's very sacred. And the importance of religion is to know that God, does not leave us. And so from birth to death is a very sacred time. What was your second question?
You believe in something that you're reluctant to say.
So passionate.
Right. In my belief, as we're talking about peace, I would go as far to say, as I don't believe in war. I would consider myself a pacifist, a person of peace to the end. I would say that two wrongs do not make a right. The way to heal evil is with love, to forgive, to talk, and not pick up a gun. The thing that really bugs me, and I'll just add this, is when President Bush got on national television and recited Psalm 23, and then he declared war. That really hit me hard. And something that I guess I still struggle with. We're talking about patriotism also. So I guess I've kind of answered a few of your questions. And I'll let the rest of these people talk now.
I may not go in order, but just to say, I think Buddhism might be the only religion that I know of which has not at some point in time not professed war. All of the other religions, including the present time and in the past, Hinduism, Christianity, Muslim religion, wars have been fought in the name of those religions. About creation is sacred. God created life in all its aspects. And we, as human beings, as God's creation, have no right to destroy it. Having said that, I would like to say that destruction is part of creation. You see this in nature all the time, even in our own bodies. The cells that I had yesterday have died and been replaced by new cells, as far as I understand biology. So, the leaves die and the new leaves come in the spring. So that's destruction, and it's part of nature. But it's not up to us to take over the task of destruction. So we should not use a nuclear bomb to destroy something. Let it be God's job, and God, in Hinduism at least, does destroy the creation and recreate it at his or her pleasure. With regard to your question about resources, as an economist and having grown up at a time, born at a time when India was part of the British Empire, the colonialism, what was that all about? It was all about grabbing resources. And it has changed today. I'm a business professor in the sense that it's not countries who go overseas to get resources. The international corporations have taken that over. And like a couple of years, last 2 or 3 years, the World Trade Conference has had a lot of people demonstrate about the globalism and so on, because a lot of countries feel that they are not getting the best out of it in some sense. There was an American company which wanted to give a patent to like basmati rice, which people in India have used for thousands of years, that sort of thing.
Creation in Islam is similar to the creation we've seen in Judaism and Christianity, because Islam is inclusive of those two religions. And God's creation has been repeated and has a purpose, because even the simplest thing we make in this world has a purpose for that to me. And in the Islamic way, the way we were created and the reason we were created is to be obedient for God, just to avoid things that may irritate God. The second thing, which I'll skip one of your questions, but I'll jump to the resources things. Growing up in Somalia and having a civil war, the whole concept of having that problem has to do with resources in the country. And during the Cold War era, the strategic location of that country created that the Soviet Union and the United States have to compete a base there. And then what happened? There was some conflict between Somalia and neighboring country, and that irritated the Soviet Union, which had there a base, and the U.S. proposed them, get rid of them, and we'll be there. Then after the Civil War, one of the Somali speakers who was here, I think, 3 weeks ago, mentioned one concept that fits to the point where the Somali Civil War erupted at the beginning of 91. And the U.S. troops were there, right, in 2 years, 3 years. Compare that to Rwanda, where there was genocide, killing 3 million people in a few months. Why they didn't go there? Why did they go there? It has to do resources that exist in the country. And nations are combining those resources. And the conflicts we have in the world, most of them have to do with those resources.
Thank you. Wonderful questions, by the way. Profound, and I had to even take notes. Speaking of creation being sacred, in the Jewish tradition, yes, very much so, to the point where we're not allowed to kill animals for food until we pray about taking that animal's life. That's what kosher meat, you've heard that term, is about. It's killed in a particular way that recognizes that the life that's being taken is a life, part of God's creation. When we eat fruit, we say prayers to God, thanking them for creating that fruit. When we eat bread, there's ritual and prayer in many parts of Jewish life. There are even prayers that you say before you make love, thanking God for providing us with that lovely part of life. And so it's a very great, it's a religion that is inclusive of reminding ourselves that we are here because this is God's creation. We need to thank God for all of creation. We say blessings even before meals, and we say blessings after meals as a way of recognizing God's input and that creative force. I am especially touched by your questions about being deeply reluctant and things you believe in, because I think you don't have a religious background without some grave ambivalences, or at least that's been my experience, that I do not come unambivalently into life as a Jewish person. It's hard to be a member of a minority group without having some internalized ambivalence about that also, particularly a historically maligned minority. And I see this particularly right now. I'm extremely torn about the real estate struggle in Israel-Palestine right now, speaking of putting those two issues together. There is a horrible conflict over that city of Jerusalem of who owns the land there. I've been to Israel 5 times, and it's wonderful and it's magnificent to have a place where Jews can finally have a place of their own, because we have been wandering for so many centuries with a place at the what's the term I'm thinking of? With the permission, sometimes gracious, sometimes not, of whosever country we've been a part of. So there's a place for our people now, and that's a very sacred piece and something we don't want to let go of. We've lost our homes so many times. Yet at the same point, I'm also horribly torn by the destruction that's happening over this area. And I'm very ashamed of many of my people in my religion who use religion as a focus of why we're having this fight. And this is extremely painful for me. And when I speak of reluctance in this group, it's very difficult, even within a group of Jews as well as a group of mixed group, to share those opinions, because it's very fierce and very powerful. And extremely painful, because if you come from a tradition that's pacifist and you see something that you've struggled for all your life in terms of having a place for Jews be a portion where people are so, where you're seeing behaviors that are unlike acceptable behaviors to you, this is extremely painful. As you can probably hear as I say that, it's hard to even get the words out. And so when you talk about, is it resources? Yeah, it's resources. I think much of the pain in the world is that people with power take resources from people who don't have power, and those who have, the most chips kind of cash them in for what they can get. I think we live in we're all incredibly fortunate in this room. We've grown up in or have living in a culture where we use 40% of the world's resources in this country. I mean,
More like
25-30%. And what percent of the population are we?
5 or 6%.
5 or 6%. And we utilize this and these resources, and it's not that it comes from thin air. We take it from other people, and we take it out of the mouths and cultures of others. And I think I have to stop at that point, but these are really, really good questions, and thank you.
Okay. One of the concepts and basic foundations with Buddhism is reincarnation, rebirth, and reincarnation. And when you talk about reincarnation, you're talking about not just being born and then dying and then it ends. It's a circle, cyclic cycle. And so when we're talking about creation, being born as a human being is you're the most, when you say lucky, or what you've done in your past life so you've been born as a human being, and as a human being, you have the potential to free all sentient beings, and that's what the concept is that you keep reborn and reincarnate so that all sentient beings all end suffering. And so as a human being, because we have this thought and we have this knowledge that we can actually change, and this rationality, we're very fortunate to be able to do that. So the concept in terms of creation, there isn't like a God that you really believe in, but more of what they said karma. If people know karma is, it's cause and effect, and whatever you do now affects either now or indirectly or in your next life, and whatever you're doing now was because of your past life. So then that concept is also about impermanence, and basically impermanence is also saying that nothing is static. Everything depends on each other. Now, in terms of what you believe in, you're reluctant to say. Sometimes I think some things are better left not said, you know. And to me, what I'm saying is that is like forgiveness. You know, sometimes you have to take a step back, but there are certain things that do need to be said, but probably not at the moment. You know, maybe in a different manner, maybe in a different way. So that would be my question. And then current world around resources, just, you know, from how I am actually in America is because of the Vietnam War and because of the issues that surrounded Southeast Asia. And I really believe, and even if we're looking at September 11, I really believe that the power in war is really about resources and how what you can control, you know, with the gas issues and those kinds of a thing. And I mean, I was remembering somebody was telling me, you better go get gas because it's going to be $5. And there's these line of people, and this is, I don't remember them, but they were all getting gas. And at one point, there's a gas station right by my house. They had to close because they didn't have any more gas. So, you know, and I guess that would be my and I'm not sure what you're asking about that in terms of, you know, I'm not really in economics. So.
I just want to add a couple of points. The first part of Bao's answer about reincarnation, Hinduism pretty much agrees on all of that. With regard to the reluctance to say something, the times that I feel reluctant to say something is when I realize that my saying so would hurt the listener. And if I recognize that, if I realize that, I'll hold it as to what do I gain by hurting this person's feelings, for example. The third point about resources I want to add to what I said before. We had a liberation of Kuwait 10, 11 years ago. And it was justified because of our need for oil. Tibet was occupied by China more than 50 years ago. We have not liberated it yet, and they don't have any oil.
Thank you. I think we'll end this time together, and this has certainly been a highlight, and I want to commend all the students who have planned this day. Just a personal piece, this is one piece of Augsburg that makes it such a joy to live and work and learn in this place. And so let's thank the panel.